Hey, this is Jamie King from Jamie King Audio. You're listening to Misery Point Radio.
Welcome back to Misery Point Radio. Thanks for joining me once again on this epic journey to seek out and destroy all that doth suck in the universe, and to deliver unto thee the holy piles of awesomeness that will lead to your audio salvation. Or damnation, depending on your warped point of view. Either way, I appreciate you being here as my companions through the wasteland. Well, today's epic journey on the quest for said piles of awesomeness brings us back to the distant land of North Carolina, which seems to have become quite the landing pad for this show. I know. It's no coincidence, though, as many of my guests do in fact reside there, in what has, in my opinion, become the new capital for all kinds of metal, from the blackest death to the thrashiest thrash to the most technical and experimental power and prog metal. And in this oasis of awesomeness, one man stands apart, using his divine talents of musical wizardry to record, produce, mix, and master an inhuman amount of awesomeness as he works with countless bands to bring forth the metal and solidify North Carolina as the true epicenter of all that is heavy and extreme. Even his name, royal and divine by decree, a true king, reigning over the metal Holy Land, responsible for churning out award-winning albums and working with true legends in the industry. I'm talking about none other than the legendary Jamie King. And this is an epic conversation you don't want to miss, because you'll get the inside scoop on his rebranding, his recording philosophy, his take on the industry, the re-emergence of his band Swift, and his thoughts on working with bands like prog rockers Between the Buried and Me, Thrash Masters Outlier, and of course, OG death metal gods False Prophet, and so much more. So kick back, enjoy, and learn from one of the true masters. Here we go. All right, so welcome to Misery Point Radio from Jamie King Audio, the man himself, Jamie King. Jamie, thanks for joining me today, brother. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Cool, yeah. It's been kind of a long, crazy process to make this happen, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've had some interesting bumps in the road, but we're here and we're ready to rock this thing.
Cool. All right, so I do want to ask you, though, so up until very recently, you were branded as the Basement Recording, and then now you've kind of rebranded yourself as a Jamie King Audio. So what's up with the change there?
Well, I did the basement recording thing. I mean, I've always worked, I started out in my parents' basement, actually. And it was just like a cinder block wall basement here in North Carolina. And, I didn't want to false advertise and make people believe they're coming to some real, awesome studio facility or anything. It was a literal basement. So
legitimately a basement?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there was no, so it made it clear, like, hey, it's just, I'm recording in my basement. So, but, so that was, the reason for that from the beginning. But, and I'm still working on my basement here in Winston-Salem in my own home now. But, it's more of a, it's got finished walls and things like that. And, but, more of my work here recently has become more like mixing and mastering and less actual recording. So, that's, and then the name Jamie King is, way more known to the public than the basement, as opposed to, and management just suggested, don't, as opposed to promoting, your facility, which you don't really have one, just promote your name. Your name is, more known. So,
crazy. So
it makes sense,
Yep. And how did that sound when they said, hey, promote your name, and all of a sudden now you're your own product?
I'm down with it. That's awesome. Luckily I've got an easy to say and pronounce name, or, say and spell and pronounce, so that works out.
Awesome. Well, you're definitely staying busy, that's for sure. I'm sure the clients that you have rolling through your basement aren't too concerned that they're actually showing up into a basement. They're getting looks like a pretty badass facility you got going on there. I've seen some cool promo stills and some footage and whatnot.
It's, it's just a basement, but I do have the correct gear for what I'm doing. I've got top of the line, some analog gear for mastering and things like that, and all the proper mics to record, metal and rock and stuff of that nature and stuff.
Oh yeah, you're kind of known actually for kind of more of the hard edge stuff, the metal, the rock, kind of the progressive stuff. Was that by design, or did that just kind of fall into your lap and that's kind of what you stuck with?
Yeah, it kind of. I mean, well, yeah, because when I started recording, I started recording for my bands, and my bands were always on the heavier side, and so when people heard my early recordings of my own band, they were metal-esque type bands, so it was like, so obviously the metal bands were kind of like, hey, where did you record and that kind of thing. So, and then I'd record more metal bands, and of all different variations, and so yeah, it's tended to stay on the heavy side. It's kind of it's the music I grew up listening to and playing and all that stuff. So even though I have done a few like country rock projects and things like that, pop rock, things of that nature, whatever, my forte is definitely on the heavy prog side of things.
Cool. So you kind of touched on it a little bit that you're doing a lot of mixing and mastering, but you actually have a lot of roles as a producer, as an engineer, as a mixing engineer. Kind of tell us about all this stuff, all the different roles that you play, and what are the differences between those different roles? Yeah,
there's actually a lot of roles. Traditionally a producer is somebody who actually gets into the material. A lot of times when you're talking about a producer with a commercial record label and commercial styles of music, they actually help bands craft the material. Take the band's ideas and things like that. Honestly, I don't do a whole lot of the traditional, production role in that regard. Most of the bands, most of my clients, they pretty much have things worked out the way they want. There's no rules with progressive metal and metal like there is with commercial styles of music. Commercial labels and radio, a lot of radio stations, they like songs to be 3.5, 4.5 minutes long, and there's like, hey, we want verse, chorus, bridge type structure, things of that nature. And a lot of times producers try to help the bands craft a song into a radio single or whatever. But obviously in this style of music, there's not a lot of that going on. So my role as a producer is mainly to try to get the tones and this, and the takes that the artist wants for the final product, to make sure, basically to get the best out of them and the best translation, for what they do and what they're going for.
So if you're acting as a producer, you're involved in guiding the final sound, the tonality, not so much the direction the band takes, but, taking control over the sonic qualities and making suggestions on what kind of effects to put where and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some band, I work with some clients who they know exactly what they want through and through for every aspect, what kind of guitar tone, what kind of effects, what kind of overall sound. But then sometimes I have clients who come in and is like, hey man, we want to let you, use your, what do you think we should sound like? We want your expertise, and, this is what we're going for. This is the market we're trying to reach. And, so there's varying degrees. It depends on the band. It depends on who all's involved. Sometimes every once in a while there'll be a label involved, and sometimes they have particular requirements or, a vision for their client and things of that nature that you have to consider. Normally I'm, because like I said, I'm from the band background. I'm almost always from the band or from the artist's point of view on things. So,
right.
I'm usually I usually just try to realize what the band's vision is if they have one. And if not, then I try to figure out what their vision might be and do that, not really impart my sound, like I don't really have a producer sound. I try to allow the band to sound the way they sound, and maximize that.
Right. So, I read that you got your start then kind of with all that stuff kind of back in the mid 90s, recording bands and projects on 4-tracks, which is kind of how I got started.
Yep.
And then did you just kind of progress, end up going to 8-track, 16-track, 24-track, and then ultimately into just kind of full-blown computer recording? Or
yeah, well, I went to digital pretty early on. I mean, some listeners out there might know about the old school ADATs, the digital tape machines, that were popular.
The Elisa stuff.
Yeah, in the mid to late 90s. That was kind of the thing. And so I had a 4-track, and I think I was able to save up enough money to buy one ADAT. It was like 8-track, of digital recording. And so I I basically just, I started kind of in the analog realm, and even when I was using the ADATs, I was still using the mixing board, the console type thing, and the effects, outboard effects units. Obviously it's the digital recording, but it was still analog processing and stuff like that, and no capability of editing. But I was working with that for a couple of years before I was finally able to find a used Pro Tools 888 system. It was one of the early Pro Tools rigs, with the cream and white Mac, all the old.
Oh man!
I remember. I tell people this all the time, but they had, the, like 7 gig SCSI drive was like, $800, and then people were like, what?
Yeah, I had a Roland Virtual Studio with a SCSI CD burner attached to it.
Yeah.
Boy, that was slow. Remember one CD, like 2 hours later.
Yeah, you go to lunch and come back.
It wouldn't transfer all the way, and you're like, no! Starting over. Oh, now I got to duplicate this, Great.
Yeah.
There goes 3 days worth of work for like a dozen copies.
Yeah. I've got clients, I'm sure, that still remember that, like you want to process some limiting in Pro Tools, it's like, all right, let's go grab something to eat, and these guitars will be limited when we come back, or the snare drum will be limited when we come back. It was a crazy time, but but it was amazing. Having said that, I didn't have the money for racks of crazy outboard gear and stuff like that, so it enabled me to to get a little more produced type product that you can hear with the major labels and stuff we're putting out. I could get something similar in my parents' basement. So it was actually quite revolutionary for me, to go that route. And of course, like I've just been following through with Pro Tools upgrades up until I guess I finally did the HD thing in about 2004 or 5 or something like that. And
I haven't stepped into that one yet, but right now it's just me. So that HD that's a daunting price tag, but and the system requirements are pretty beefy. So I'm not quite there, but yeah. So when did you decide though that you're taking it from a project? Clearly you've got a passion for it. You found out you were pretty good. You had some talent. When did you say, this is what I'm going to do? This is going to be my life from here on out. Where was the point of that?
2001, I was working in a music store, and the band I was in, my old band Swift, we were negotiating with all the major labels other than I think maybe Arista at the time, through from 99 to 2000 into 2001. And, we had settled on a deal with MCA, and 9/11 happened in 2001. And we were in our third month of negotiation with MCA, and they called up our manager like, look, the economy's kind of in bad shape. We can't, it was going to be like a $1 million type deal, and you're like, we can't invest in a unproven heavy band right now until we see how the economy's going to shape up. And so basically everything just, came to a halt. The carpet was pulled out from under us, and it was like, I had been doing recording on the side and working in a music store, kind of just waiting for my band thing to kick off and just to go on tour and things of that nature. And so when that happened, I was like, man, I just need to focus on recording, something that's solid, where I can make some money, because, we were, I was living in an apartment. I was actually struggling to pay the rent, working in the music store. And then the news that the music store was going to shut down. The owner of the music store I was working with, he had inherited a lot of money, and he was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And it was like, oh man, like, what am I going to do? But luckily I had a backlog of bands who wanted to get in and record with me. And, I was just like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I really, it was difficult the first couple of years because I was still learning, the full production thing with Pro Tools. And, I had to make the plunge and buy a computer, and I guess I had the Digio 1 system with the old ADATs starting out. And then I got the Digio 2, it was like I upgraded where I absolutely had to, at that moment to get a decent quality product. And, so yeah, I mean, that was kind of how all that came to be.
And you'd mentioned Swift, and just a quick segue on that. You guys are, I read you're getting ready to do like a 20th anniversary kind of reunion thing, or?
Yeah, we're doing in December, we're going to be doing 20th anniversary show / CD release party. Technically a record release, I guess, like we will have some CDs, but I guess people don't say that anymore. But yeah, we had a record that we'd been working on and off of just old material, just it was some of the riffs, even, guitar player and I had when we were like 15, stuff, just a bunch of leftover stuff that we never used. And so we finally finished that up like this past year and released that record. But we never had a show for it or anything like that. And so, yeah, we're going to do a release show. Like, we were never known nationally or internationally or anything like that. We had a good fan base locally. Most of our local shows are around 1,000, people in attendance and stuff. And there's, a lot of the old schoolers will come out of the woodworks for the, for the novelty element. It's like, oh, I remember that band when I was in high school. And, but we're going to do, like, I guess it'll likely be, at least the one final show, maybe a few shows or something like that, just for fun, just to hang out with our old fans. The people still want to hear it and stuff like that. So, we're looking forward to that. I'm working on learning how to relearning how to play drums again now. should be interesting.
So you're recording all this yourself, though, I assume? Yeah,
I did all the recordings for Swift. I guess Swift started my recording business really, for the most part, because we became pretty quickly popular back in the late 90s, on the local scene, and people would hear, that was the first like multi-track, recording that I had done. It actually sounded pretty decent, pretty clean and stuff like that. And nobody around here was doing anything that sounded decent, particularly for heavy music, so I kind of stood out. The production was like beyond what, the sound quality was beyond what other local engineers and stuff, were putting out. And the local bands started approaching me, including Between the Buried and Me, who's, Between the Buried and Me is the biggest band that I've worked with to date. And
we'll talk about them in a few minutes here.
Yep.
But so now, did you record Swift where you're at now at the basement?
The new record, yeah, we did that was actually tracked everywhere. Some of it was tracked in New York, some of it was tracked in Wilmington. It was very remote because a couple of guys from Swift, years back, probably 2005, 6, they moved up to New York, and one of our members was going to school in Wilmington. He's now got his doctorate degree in chemistry. But he, like I said, so it was kind of a remote situation. We're like, hey, we got all these riffs and stuff. Let's just finish a record up, kind of thing. And so they would track guitars wherever they were, and they would send the DI files, and I would track the drums here myself. And then some of the stuff we got together to actually track guitars, and the vocals. I think the vocals, some of the vocals were tracked up in New York, but most of the vocals were down here in my studio. But yeah, all the records prior to that were recorded in my parents' basement, which was just a, cinder block kind of wall basement with tools hanging up and weed eaters and things like that.
Right. Cool. So, getting back into some of the bands you've worked with, of course, I know you've worked with some friends of mine, of course, Outlier, and, Ray Curry considers you the 6th member of Outlier. And you're working with a couple of my friends there in False Prophet. I'm excited to see what you got going on with those guys. But I would say that, most noticeably, you've been kind of known for your work with a lot of bands, including Between the Buried and Me. So, how did you get affiliated? Go ahead and start that. You started telling it and I interrupted you, but how did that affiliation come to be?
Well, if I remember correctly, I think, like I said, back late 90s, I was active with my band Swift, and I used to also do live sound, and I had done sound for, a couple of the guys in Between the Buried and Me. They used to have been a straight edge hardcore band called Prayer for Cleansing. And I had done sound for those guys, and they were kind of doing the metalcore sound like before that was even a thing, really. And but I think they heard the Swift record, and hey, this sounds good. Like, who recorded that? And I think somebody had called me or approached me to record them, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And it was cheap, so I recorded the first BT Bam demo. I think it was in 2000 or 2001 or something like that. And that was the demo. They got signed to Life Force Records with that demo. or after that demo, and they came back to do their first full length, which was literally just a live recording in my parents' basement there again. Just like I had done Swift and a lot of the other early bands.
And when you say live recording, you just mean kind of the old school style. Everybody's together in the room.
Exactly.
And you're tracking the main stuff together, and then maybe the overdubs for solos or some vocal harmonies come kind of after the fact. But the core audio is all recorded at the same time versus all separately.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it.
I love that.
Yeah, the early Swift records, I mean, all the Swift records really, except for the last one, out of necessity, were done that way. And the early BT Bam records, they all just jammed together, and we would overdub leads and vocals and maybe touch up a rhythm part here or something like that here or there. But yeah, that's how we did it. It's largely how I did it. And before I got into the full production of the industry, kind of like major label spec stuff, like the labels, like kind of, they're, they want things, in close to perfect time and tune and all that kind of stuff. So there's more computer production work that started going into it. I guess, the further into the, 2000s, it kind of was expected to be done, a little more, production editing stuff. So.
Sure. Yeah. So, and with your work with Between the Buried, you also kind of won some cool awards, right? Producer of the Year, Metal Injection.
Yeah. I don't know how
crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was this luck. I mean, I'm getting all these. This past year, I've gotten all these accolades. Like Between the Buried and me was, nominated for a Grammy, and I got Best Metal Producer and. All this stuff. And it was, I know there's like way better producers out there, people there were people that I like, listen to for inspiration on the list. And it's like, what, how did I win this? But it's, of course I'm not complaining. I'll take it. It's definitely,
right.
It's definitely, helpful promotion.
I'm sure it hasn't hurt the workflow coming through.
No. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely is nice to be, for your hard work to be recognized. I mean, I really feel like the BT Band guys have worked really hard for a lot of years. And, I know I've done my 70, 80 hours a week, for years and years. It's like, really put a lot of effort into trying to do this and learn this stuff. It's as you probably know, coming from the time, there was no internet, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the YouTube, you couldn't go on YouTube and learn how to, quantize drums or do any of this stuff. You had to figure it out yourself, really, unless you could find an industry guy who was just willing to divulge, what they considered at that time to be secrets. Those were like industry secrets, how to get
right. Those were sonic signatures that people were basing their careers on.
Yeah, they guarded that stuff at that time. Now it's all common knowledge and educated online for free and whatever. And it's like but that time, it took a lot of work and time to get things to sound even half decent, so, so it's nice to be recognized, at some point for a lot of hard work and stuff and appreciated for it.
Sure. Well, absolutely. And, it's one thing with the recognition, but then you realize that it's not just one factor. I mean, it's the whole piece of work that resonates with the public, right? So if you're a part of that piece of work, everybody's getting recognition, for that piece of work. I mean, there's the band and there's the producers and there's all the management and all the video people. So I mean,
absolutely.
Just that entire scenario, I think, just really struck with the public, and just you guys just put out a kick-ass piece of art that I think just hit at the right place at the right time. So that's congrats to you guys and that whole team.
I appreciate
it. It's pretty crazy when you're talking about also not being able to back in the day go back and refer to YouTube or videos or hardly even books out there at that point. With the advent of the internet, the entire industry really changed. And you talked about kind of your role now is that you've really gotten more into like the mixing and the mastering and the post-production, because pretty much anybody with a laptop can now record their own album at home by themselves, step by step, right? So that whole digital realm has now, I think, opened up a lot of doors for people. What do you think about that? Is that something that you support, you like that, or are you kind of still hearkening back to those old school days?
There's plus and minuses with that. It's I think back in the day, everybody had to work harder, and it was, like, especially one of the big negatives is that, like people, there's a loss in performance in the recording element, that I still try to keep in my recordings. I like try to get people to come in and actually play the drums. Like, we're not programming the drums. We're not going to quantize the life out of it. We're not going to, go only samples and things like that. It's like, it seems like.
Yeah, they're not all triggers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff you can do at home quickly and easily, but still difficult to, you have to have a lot of good quality preamps and mics and things like that in a good space to do drums proper and things like that. And it's like, and then back in the day, the bands used to write their record. They would rehearse their record before they go in the studio. And then it was just, about getting good tones and takes. And now, people, they don't even write their records. They're like, they've got riffs on Guitar Pro or whatever. And they just expect it, hey, we're going to just program the drums, right? And we'll figure out how it all goes together. And it's like, there's not even any song, it's just like, so that's, it's amazing that you can do these things. I think these are great tools, like writing tools, like Guitar Pro and, the drum programming and all that stuff. They're really good tools, and they can sound fantastic, fidelity wise and stuff. They can oftentimes sound beyond what you can achieve in the acoustic realm with the real players. But it's not better to me. It's like, you wonder, like, where are all the new bands? Where are the new hero bands? We have all our, hero bands from the past, and they had to, part of, they made that connection because it was real, it was like they were playing and you can feel it and stuff like that. And then this new stuff's just really sterile and lifeless and just doesn't,
a lot of it doesn't have an organic feel to it, that's for sure. And, I come from, back in the old school metal days, and, we always talk about those albums that have the raw sound. I mean, there's a level of production to them, but they still have that feel, like, the gains are cranked all the way up and you can kind of hear the guitar buzz and you can hear the tone of the kick drums, and it's not just like an impulse, the ticka 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 kick drum sound that everybody likes so much. We joke about that all the time, and I'm a terrible audio producer. It's not my calling by any means, but it's fun to listen to those old albums. I was talking to Rick Ross, and he was talking about recording From Beyond, and then comparing that recording to Back From Beyond. It's the same band, but two different takes on the genre, so it's just crazy how technology has affected, I think, the overall sound, and what we refer to as a polished sound that's enjoyable to listen to sometimes comes at the sacrifice of that live organic feel.
Yeah, and I think therefore connection. Like on the surface, like I said, the slick, super punchy, super in your face, loud thing. It sounds great. I just, for some reason, I feel like that's part of why these new bands aren't making a connection with the people. Or they're it's something playing into that. But like I think that there's a sweet spot that you can find with the new technology and the new process, the way things, I think it's great that people can track guitars at home, and usable guitars, could save, a lot of this stuff saves money for the client, having to go into the studio. And I personally enjoy, like I said, I mean, like, now that I'm doing more mixing and mastering, I can be more flexible with my schedule. I can go pick my kid up from school, stuff like that. When I have clients, I'm kind of, I'm with them 10 hours a day or whatever it is, and so, there's a lot of positives, logistically, people don't have to spend crazy money traveling or, get hotels and things like that. So there's a lot of things that are very positive. So, if you can, I think if everybody can find that sweet spot and ride around, in that area with it, there's a lot of, new bands that are huge, Ghost and all, they're and Opeth, and they're doing the organic thing, you know what I'm saying? They understand, they've gone through a lot of these bands have gone through the era of, overproduction and realizing that that's possibly a mistake, and they're kind of, the bands are seeing that they need to do things real. The bands who were, you got bands like Periphery who used to do everything super processed and programmed, but now they're like, hey, let's use real amps, let's use real drums, and they can still get us clean.
Yeah, it's Misha Mansour's band. They're a great band.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's, it's like a lot of these bands are recognizing that, hey, we might be able to, impress more people. It's more impressive if it's a real performance, and I think it makes a deeper connection with humanity. I think there's something about it's just like.
Do you find that bands come into the studio unprepared or not as prepared as they should be? When you start pressing buttons, do they get the oh shit factor going on? Are you dealing with that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not, I've got some bands who are like obviously between the Barry and me, for instance, they'll write the record and record it all before even coming to me.
Right.
Years ago, I gave Blake one of my old recording interfaces and stuff. And I think, since then they've been recording the whole record. So they come in and, basically, they'll still write extra things in the studio, like an extra guitar part or, some keys or some vocal layers,
supplemental
things like that.
Stuff, though.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. But the basic song is there, and they've taken the time and done it right. But you have some other people who just, they come in, and I think they think that it's my role to write the record for them, and it's, it's just like, and I'm fine with that. If they come in and, hey, we want you to write my record, I can't do it, or I don't want to do it. And it's discussed beforehand. But see, the problem is it's never discussed beforehand. Like they show up, they're like,
right.
And I make it clear when I book my clients, or my management books my clients, that, hey, if it's written and well rehearsed, it's going to cost this much. It's going to take this much time. It's worded like that in every, discussion with a client. And they're like, okay, yeah, we accept this, sign the contracts. And they come in and it's not written and well rehearsed material at all. It's barely written and definitely not rehearsed, and that causes problems, it causes stress, and then now all of a sudden I don't have enough time. They don't have enough money and budget. And, it's just bad for everybody overall, and,
yeah, I hear stories from a friend of mine that's a studio manager over here in my neck of the woods, and he says he gets that all the time is, people show up and then they're blaming, the engineers, that are blaming, whoever's running the board, that they don't know how to get the sounds right and this and that. And it's like, we haven't even started recording yet, guys. You guys are not even on the same page. So I've heard about that several times.
Yeah, there's
that's you got to have somebody to blame, I guess.
Every
if you're not prepared,
job,
right?
there's negatives, and things have just changed. The problems that we used to have in the past are just they're just different now. And but right. I think but like I said, there's that's what just divides who's great and who's not. It just seems like the bands who are successful, the bands who put in the work, and do it the right way. I haven't seen any, the bands I've worked with, if they come in, they're unprepared and don't do their homework and whatever, they usually don't become successful. So, so it's, kind of,
right.
Fixes itself in the end,
So, how was it working with, False Prophet with this new Cam Lee split project they're working on?
Oh, that's awesome. Well, for me, it was like, it was just crazy because, when I was 13, I was going to see False Prophet, and
right.
They had their local venue had a, like Thrash Sunday, they had, they'd do like Thrash on Sunday nights. And I remember seeing False Prophet, as a 13-year-old, and they came out with their, their image, as what it is, it's like the smoke machine and the, the whole evil thing or whatever, I was like, man, I was like terrified. Like, this is crazy, And then they're shredding double bass and like, just right. Super, so I was like, this is awesome, I became a fan pretty quick, just because, it was just so extreme. And, to be able to, my 13-year-old self, knowing that I might possibly record those guys one day, or some of the guys, and it's just crazy to me, it's so, to have Paul Ray actually in the studio, it's just like, dude, you're Paul Ray, it's like, it's one of those, situations for me, so. I was actually kind of nervous. I'm like, I hope I don't, because I wanted to, to do a modern style production, where everything's clean and everything, just, I thought that was kind of appropriate, but I didn't want to go too far with it. So I was like, and with it, it's like, I know they want to be, I know it needs to sound old school because of the False Prophet fans, but I think to reach the newer fans, you can't have it as raw as, the old school productions were, wouldn't be acceptable right. with the younger crowd. So I think we found a good middle ground that we captured what they're doing right now and their tones, and used their tones and sounds, and kind of took a classic / modern approach in production and stuff. So well, I guess we'll see what people think when the song, is officially out and all that stuff. And,
and now you were initially you did the remaster for Second Death, right? Was that you?
Yes. Yeah, I actually did that. Yeah. And
so, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that was, like I said, obviously you don't have, control over, individual levels or tones and things like that. So, that was mainly just bringing it up to modern specs in terms of level and EQ and stuff of that nature. So, it's a little.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my question is so when you get a project that's kind of been around for a while and you have to be tasked with breathing new life into it.
Yeah.
How does that go about? I mean, how do you take old recordings and polish them up? I mean, I assume that you get the original masters at some point.
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of work with, Matt Radzinski of Die Bomb Records and Jeremy from Heaven and Hell. And there's a couple of record labels that I work with that specifically, focuses on the re-releasing older records, stuff that's out of print or was never actually, released in the digital realm at all, things of that nature. So a lot of those, some of the records have the old school 1-inch tape masters, and those labels will have the, we know people who can like bake the tapes and like give us digitize the audio from the actual tapes. But oftentimes all we have are like early CD copies or sometimes even cassettes, or sometimes even the vinyl's the only thing that exists. So in a lot of a lot of instances that's all we have. I want to say the False Prophet may have been from the cassette. I think it actually was. I think we're able to get a CD of that. But I can't remember. Yeah, a lot of these, some of these bands, like I said, they never made it to digital, or if they did, they were long lost. Every once in a while you have a DAT machine copy or whatever. But so the work.
So when you take these old recordings, do you just take the source, right? So a CD, for instance, and then convert it to a digital file, and then run it through computer-based EQs and filters and things like that?
Yeah, it depends. Like I said, I mean, it's so wide. I mean, we could get in depth with this thing, but like some of the records that have been released, some of the old records were properly mastered with real mastering gear, and some weren't back in the day. So I kind of try to determine, hey, was this properly mastered at some point? And if it was, then I'll keep it all in the digital realm. I'll assume that they used real, the real tube compressors and things like that back in the day. And it was, if it sounds good, and just basically I'll just shape the EQ and try to bring it up to close to industry spec without completely crushing the life out of it. So,
right.
Yeah, it's tough because it's better now actually, but 5 years ago, the industry spec for level was quite high. It's quite a crust product to get it to, like -8 RMS was kind of like the going, level, it's and it's just, that's really, cutting some of the dynamics out of the record, which I'm not a big personal fan of, but I understand from the record label standpoint, the marketing aspect, louder's better to the general public, on taste tests. So they always, they push me to go loud, to sell the product.
I think we all remember having those albums, when car stereos first became a thing, and or CD players in cars anyways, and you'd have to crank up your stereo all the way to hear something. And then as soon as you pop that out, you're blowing your speakers up because your radio is just so much louder than what you're listening to on your media.
Yeah.
And I do that. I have a lot of friends that do, podcasts and things like that too. And I listen to them like on my phone, and I'm like, man, I can't even hear your show.
Yeah.
And then if I listen to it in the car, then I have to make sure that I turn my stereo down before I eject their stuff.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It can be damaging to your ears and stuff.
Right. Well, speaking of technology, you kind of touched on it a little bit ago, and I didn't want to break you off on it, but just curious. So, the eternal debate for audio people is going to be outboard gear versus plugins.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance? I mean, what's your process on how do you decide what you're going to use with each individual artist?
Oh, it's both. To me, the answer is both. There's a lot of great stuff that's only achievable in the digital realm. But there's still some aspects of the analog stuff that's not achievable in the digital realm, in my opinion. There's a 3D depth or something. It's hard to put your finger on it, but if you hear it, you know it. There's like a living and breathing type vibe that you get when you run audio through a real tube compressor or tube EQ, as opposed to the oftentimes they have the classic analog stuff, and they'll have somebody will have done a model of it, in the computer, and the model is spot on as far as the EQ wise, as far as like the technical specs, but the plugin always sounds more like one dimensional. It always sounds flat and almost like, a lot of people say compressed. To me, it seems like limited or something. It's like it just doesn't have that living depth to it. Like I said, if you read, I've got the Manley, the standard Manley mastering gear, and it's just you put stuff through it, and it's like it feels like the drummer is behind the guitar player. Like you're in the room or something. It's like
3D spatial feeling.
Yeah, it's a spatial thing, and I don't know how or why it's like that. And I think eventually they'll get it. They'll get the digital thing. It'll be there probably eventually. It'll just take a lot of crazy processing power. They might already be able to do it. Like a lot of a lot of people, are switching over to the, in the guitar realm to these Kemper units and Axe effects and all these, modular units for guitars. But it's, like they've had these things, since our day, in the 80s and stuff. And they had Digitex, they had all these guitar processors, but those sounded really bad.
Yeah, it was Roland. Roland and Boss had all the Cosm modeling stuff back in the day, and that ended up precluding even, Line 6, which became the de facto name in modeling for well over a decade before, Axe FX and, Headrush and all these new brands kind of got into it.
Yeah, it's like I said, what's happened is, we're just like to emulate what a real tube amp does. It takes a lot of processing power, and now it's just to where the processing power is affordable enough, for it to work out. Like I said, the old Digitech stuff, we're trying to do the same thing. You couldn't afford to. It wasn't marketable to have a crazy, or it wasn't practical to have a crazy closet-sized computer to emulate a guitar amp, But now
network servers.
Now you can put it in one rack, a 3-rack space unit, and it's like now they finally have gotten the guitar emulators to sound pretty freaking close to the real amp, and it's and I think they'll.
Well, speaking of Kemper, isn't there some Jamie King signature Kemper profiles out there?
Oh yeah. Tonecrate.com actually is they featured me as one of their monthly artists or whatever. So they came up from Texas, and they grabbed the profiles of the amps that I use here in the studio and tones that I've used on some records from Between the Buried and Me and the Contortionist and others or whatever. So, but it's really cool things you can do with that stuff. So you can actually nowadays you can have the exact sounds used on others' records and stuff, which is cool and not cool at the same time.
All right. But it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. But it's a really fun.
I've been to many death metal shows with old school death metal bands who are using Kempers to get their old school sound still. So,
well, it's great. I mean, because you can.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, you can fly with it. You can go. You don't have to bring your full stacks. You can have the same sound as your whole. Our False Prophet had crazy Mesa Boogie full stack rigs and stuff. Flight rack of Mark IIs and stuff like just insane. But they can have that same sound in a little rack now. It's crazy. It's and that's to me that's a positive, very positive thing. Like I said, the negative aspect is everybody's like just using each other's tones. Nobody. It's like to me, it's still better to have your own guitar sound. It's like. Even the people who buy my tones, I'm like, that's cool. Take that tone and then manipulate it, change it into something that's your own. Don't just use it as I dialed it up for this particular project. And that's another problem with technology. Like they're using the same drum samples and the same guitar tones, and now their record sounds super similar to 10 other bands. It's like that's a problem. Right. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, I've got quite a bit of TC Electronics pedals and whatnot, which you can download artist presets via USB into pedals now, which to me is mind-blowing. And actually way more complicated than I'm willing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
but I'm like, it's too much work, man. I just want to turn a fucking knob and call it a day.
Yeah.
But, but speaking of knobs then and the digital realm, when you're mixing, I mean, are you doing in the box stuff? Or I mean, you mentioned that you weren't really working with the big boards and stuff as often anymore. What's your mixing process?
It's just all in Pro Tools. Yeah. Like that's one thing I love digital. I love the digital control, not so much the sound. Right. You know, I love the analog sound. You know, I still use the Neve and API preamps, and you know, I've got the Manley and the, you know, Empirical Labs processing SSL stuff. You know, so I've got the premium stuff for the sound with analog, but I hate analog control because it's not recallable. Like, you know, a lot of analog pieces, especially the old design stuff, if you just, I mean, you can move the you know, the knob just super slightly, and this character of the sound drastically changes. That's the stuff that drives me insane. So the thing I love about digital is the recallability, the control, you know, the incremental thing. You know, with the mixing, it's essential to me, you know, especially this day and age where, you know, like, you know, back in our day, you know, you would mix a record and people go home and they just had to live with it, you know. They'd be, you know, some of the guitars might not be loud enough, you know, or like, you know.
Right.
You know, there were issues, but it's like back in the day, it was like, okay, that was it, you know, because like to fix that, you would have to remix the whole thing, you know. Nowadays, you know, the client, you know, we can listen to it for a couple weeks, couple months, even a year, 2 years or whatever, and really fine tune, get the mix right, you know, over time. You know, and
yeah, you can pull up an old file, and you know, tweak one aspect of that and still have the original saved in case that doesn't work out. That's pretty. The whole non-destructive editing is way more convenient than sitting there with reel to reel and splicing tape.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's,
which I'm sure you've done your share of.
Yeah. It's, the tape, like I said, I mean, it's just with the analog stuff, it's just like recall is difficult. You know, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult and time consuming. And, that was one of the main things that brought me over to the digital realm is the possibility. You know, and you could do like, you know, with automation, you do like effects, things that you could never do in the analog realm. You know, just
right.
You know, and you know,
I run. So when I set up my podcast sessions and I go and I edit, it's really cool because I just do this off a MacBook, and then I have through, you know, Pro Tools, and then I have Pro Remote pulled up on my phone and another Pro Remote pulled up on my iPad.
Yeah. And
I have 3 screens, all portable screens that I can write automation with it. It's really cool. And I mean, I just cracked the surface on it, but I seen my friend record an entire album on a laptop with an iPad and a phone as basically his digital mixers and have it come out friggin' amazing.
Yeah, it's
so that realm of possibility is just mind blowing.
Yeah, I love technology in that regard. You know, and there's a lot of things that, like I said, there's you know, there's a lot of emulations of analog stuff that are really good and stuff and really usable. But you know, I mean, it's definitely made things easier for us all. You know. Yeah.
Well, in addition to, you know, kind of moving into digital realms and dealing with that kind of stuff as the industry progresses, you know, what are some of the challenges now that you face working with labels or outside artist management? You said, you know, sometimes there's specific requirements that, you know, an artist manager might want or a label might want. How does that affect what you do?
Well, I mean, I haven't run into too many issues with that. You know, in the past, there's, you know, like, because I don't do a lot of commercial stuff. I think that's, you know, if you're doing hip hop or country and things like that, and they're really pushing for radio and commercial, you know, things, I think, you know, that's, you know, more of that realm of issues. But, I've had labels, just little certain things with the mastering. The labels usually want it loud. They want it to be as loud, if not louder than other, label. Luckily, like I said, now that Apple, I just recently got Apple MFIT certified. So, Apple and Spotify and, most of the people are digesting their music or taking their music with, from online, services. So, and they're all standardizing levels, which I think is great. I don't like having to chase my levels up and down when I listen to music as a listener. So I understand why they're doing that, and I'm all for that. But it's, so now luckily the labels are fine with dynamic masters, but before they would be like, hey, can we get it louder? I'm like, dude, yes, technically yes, but it's going to crush the life out of us. Now it's going to not sound good. The kicks are going to be gone, and the snare, the punch of the snare is going to be stuff of that nature. And, I always would side with the artist, on it. And they knew it would sound better, but sometimes you just have to do what the label wants. Whoever's cutting the checks at the end of the day has to say so. As far as I'm concerned, so sometimes there would be issues with the master levels, or there's I've seen bands have issues with and I have no say so in this either, but what gets used as the single and things of that nature. I've seen that kind of play out, and or just hey, let's do even with BT Band, which I don't think it was there was a big debate, but the last record, Sumerian suggested that they wrote it as an 80-minute record, their last record, and Sumerian decided, hey, let's try splitting this up. BT Bam has been, their last 5 records have been like 70 plus minutes, which is
right.
There's a lot to digest.
Their songs are long, man. They usually average 7 to 9 minutes. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's the label, which I'm in agreement with the label on this. It's difficult to digest, to sit, to have 80 minutes to sit down to listen to a record, and so I don't know if they'll do that again, but that was definitely a label thing. That was kind of...
Well, you talked about Opeth earlier, and Opeth, I mean, every song of theirs is like an opera in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Listening to an entire Opeth album in one sitting is like an entire day's work. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the prog community loves that, but, the average public, and in particular, like radio, I understand the difficulty because you want to get radio play, but, if you got all your songs in 7 minutes, the guy who's putting that stuff together, that's a big chunk of the, airtime, you could do 2 others.
I could play your one song, or I could play 5 other songs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so I understand, and for videos, it's like, what do you do with that? It's like BT Bam hardly, they don't have a whole lot of videos, and I think it's the length, so, I understand those scenarios, those situations, but, I've had some labels, they're just like, hey, I want to take this song and separate them into 3 sections, and it's like I'm in the middle. The band doesn't want to do it, but the label's kind of insisting, and, but luckily most of the labels have, stayed out of most of the band's way, they're like, hey, let's let the band do what they do, and, we do what we want to do on the mix, and, outside of the mastering level or
just mix that guy out. It'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've heard that quite a bit.
Yeah. No, luckily I haven't experienced any of that, but yeah.
That's good. Hey, I read about your, at least I saw one of your posts online, your epic archiving project that you had in an attempt to salvage some older material. Tell me about that. I saw the picture. Now. It looks like thousands of pieces of work sitting in a box. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a whole, full bookshelf full of CDs of, all the masters that I've done over the past 20 years and, all the project files and stuff, for many years. And that's not, because I've been archiving on hard drive since like 2013 or 14 or something like that. So this is just all the archives before that. So there's thousands before I started archiving on hard drive. But yeah, I went to pull out band one of their record remastered. Somebody I'd recorded in like 99 or something, and I pulled the CD out and it just flaked away and like it kind of fell to the ground in flakes. And I was like, because I had, always have purchased the Pro Media stuff, and and it says good for 100 years or whatever, so I didn't think I was going to
cough bullshit.
Yeah, I was like, this has not been 100 years, like luckily most of it's completely fine, but there's a couple of projects that I have lost. There's one record that one of the DVDs was destroyed for whatever reason, and there's another master or whatever. So there's, and luckily these are bands that, that are way, they put out the one album back in '99 and, they're, I don't even know if they're live, you know what I'm saying? It's one of those scenarios. So,
Right.
so it's not any of the, more important, not to say it suggests it's not important, like I try to keep everybody's stuff, but it's none of the
Well,
big
and
band.
assuming that the bands also at some point have their own copies of the same material,
Yeah,
wouldn't
so
they, for the most part.
It could be possibly still out there. Yeah. I mean, digital's digital. Right. A lot of people think, you have to have the original master. And like, dude, if you got a copy, if you got a CD, if you ever press it on CD, there's a exact same thing that what I have on my CDRs here. It's actually better. If you have the actual silver press CDs, it's actually a better source for a master than my CDR master. So, but yeah, I mean, just because of that, I decided, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and digitize everything. I did that with my ADAT tapes years ago. They started disintegrating, so I put all that stuff to hard drive, and then so it's a daunting task, and I've been working on it for past months, and I still have 2 huge boxes to go, but it'll be all in the digital realm, and then I'll copy it and copy it to like 3 or 4 or 5 hard drives, and hopefully it won't. Hopefully, I won't have any problems for some years. But it's always, it's easier to copy from hard drives than 1,000 CDs. It's like a way less time.
I think that's something that nobody really ever thought about years ago. I've got this physical product. What the hell do I do with it? How do I keep it? I mean, nobody thought that it would just erode and disintegrate, right? And all of a sudden, you're just like, I've got thousands of pieces of work that are going Thanos and just getting snapped out of existence at this point. So yeah, crazy. I don't envy having to go through that product. That seems like a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah, with the tape. I mean, like I said, that's why a lot of these bands we have to use for their remasters and stuff. We have to use the cassette or whatever because their original 1-inch tape is just flaked away to nothing, and you have to store this stuff in like perfect conditions, like zero humidity. Of course, I'm in a basement, so it's obviously not ideal for tape, especially, So,
right.
But yeah, I mean, unless you have the money to put it in some sort of a humidity control vault of some sort,
You need a cedar vault, man. You need the Guitar Center acoustic room.
Exactly.
For your tapes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's but like I said, I mean, hopefully hard drives, I mean, we don't know how long the hard drives or flash drives and stuff will last either. But the cool thing about that is once it's, it's at least easy to make copies, from there. It's like, it's not easy to make copies when you got 1,000 individual CDs. It's like, it's months worth of work here. But once it's your hard drive, you can just leave it overnight. And, like back in the day, like I was saying, the SCSI drives, I mean, it was like, 7 gig SCSI drive was like $600, $700, $800, So archiving to hard drives back then just financially wasn't possible for any of my bands. So that's why, I always had to, early on, like I just archived a DVD. That was the only affordable way to do that.
So what's something that you haven't had a chance to do professionally with your audio stuff that you'd like to do? I mean, soundtracks, live music, documentaries. What's something that you'd still like to break into?
That's a tough one. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty comfortable where I am. I enjoy the mixing and mastering a lot. For the records, and it could definitely be fun to do a soundtrack for a movie. I've been, I think. I don't even know if I should be saying it, but I think BT Band were, there was talks of them doing something like that at some point, possibly making a movie for their record. Because, I mean, they kind of write these long, epic things anyway. It'd be like right up their alley. So maybe one day, maybe something like that will happen. But one thing I'd always wanted to do, this is it's not relevant to playing, but I always wanted to play in like a Coliseum, like as a drummer. Like in my band, we never got to play in like that setting. We always played the clubs. We played some pretty big clubs and stuff, and some outdoor, stuff or whatever, which is pretty fun. But for some reason, I just always wanted to play in a Coliseum. Feel my kick drum. It's got a huge verb on it and stuff.
Yeah, just hear that boom.
Yeah. So with the Swift reunion, we may try to do something at the local Coliseum Annex. Some big like local music festival or whatever. And I might have my dream come true or something.
Yeah, just make sure 75,000 of your friends show up to support you.
Oh yeah, I don't care about that. If we have 1,000, that'd be a dream come true right there. But.
Yeah, that's pretty killer. So what I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but what is your take on when you recommend somebody wanting to get into your field of work? Do you recommend school at this point? Because this is a very controversial topic. A lot of people say, I went to school. School was cool. I learned a few things, but at the end of the day, what I'm doing is not stuff that I learned in school.
Yep. No, absolutely not. Do not go to school. It's a waste of time and money. In general, as far as this is concerned, like I said, I went to school. I got my associate's degree in arts, and I was going to go to school for audio engineering. But I mean, frankly, I met some of the instructors, and I already knew more about real engineering than they did from just doing it, And then now, all the education, I've got classes on, the urm.com. I've got classes on Creative Live. There's a lot of other fantastic industry guys who have classes out there online. You can learn what the real guys that are masters of the field, you can learn what they're doing from video, nowadays. I mean, it's like...
And you're teaching classes, and Tommy Rogers is working with you on some of that stuff, correct?
Yeah, he did the Creative Live class was with Tommy, one of his solo songs. So we did a kind of a group thing, like songwriting / recording type of thing for that with Creative Live. So...
for you think, in your opinion, doing what you do, you find it more helpful to be able to kind of just log in and out to individual sessions to learn something specific that you want to learn, rather than enrolling in an entire course material and paying for a curriculum that you may or may not be able to take advantage of.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, especially if you're wanting to do exactly what I'm doing, which is metal and rock and progressive styles of music, stuff like that. A lot of the schools, they still don't, they don't focus on metal. You'll learn like what's done in hip hop, which, frankly is easy. Basically it's just learn how to record vocals and program these programs. That's it. And then you've got other schools that might focus on pop or country and stuff. But, even that, there's things that is specific to metal in terms of like the right mics for the drums, the right EQs, right dynamics processing stuff that just they're not even going to talk about in these schools as you're going to pay $80,000. They're not even going to brush on it. And I know because I've done education sessions for graduates of these schools, and they come in and they don't know anything about producing rock and metal. They know what an XLR cable is and what a preamp is and the basics, but my thing, I just honestly think, with all the information that's out there, you can learn yourself, or get in either, buy some basic gear and just dive in, to some of these classes, or on YouTube. There's a lot of information. Having said, there's a lot of misinformation on YouTube too, so you got to kind of be careful. The purchase classes are probably actually a little bit better. There. Right. There's kids and things that are like, hey, this is how you do it. And I'm like, this is not how you do it. So it's kind of, it's
actually, no, don't do that. Yeah, stop, please. Just shut your channel down. So then what do you recommend for bands and artists who they think they're ready to go into the studio? What's that final bit of advice you're going to give to them before they take that plunge, flop down a bunch of money and say, make me a recording studio artist? What are you going to say to these guys and gals?
Well, usually, what I recommend, like I said, just write your stuff and rehearse it, just do the old school. I think that always makes, because you can go into the studio and you can focus on getting good tones and takes, as opposed to like most of the bands I have come in, if they don't, the bands that don't have the material worked out and rehearsed, then we're just struggling. We're spending all the time just to get a usable take, something that's passable. You don't want just what's passable. You want something great, really good. You want great tones. You want great performances. And that's what's ultimately going to make a great record. And so, I try to encourage the bands to do that, and when you're choosing who to record with, a lot of bands, I think, we spend more money, we're going to end up with a better record, blah, blah. And it's, there's a certain degree where you do need to spend some money for somebody real. You don't want to go with somebody who doesn't consistently put out industry quality product, But having said that, you don't need to spend a fortune and record with some huge, it's in some huge studio with somebody with super huge name or whatever. Because I mean, honestly, the money would be better spent in promotion of the record. Because if you spend all your money on a recording and then you're sitting on, you got this great sounding record, but you got no money.
You can't get it in anybody's hands.
Yeah, I mean, their labels just aren't signing a lot of lesser known artists these days, and it's like, so you might have to, to get off the ground, you're going to have to promote yourself. At this point, it's really tough to get the label's attention, to get the public's attention. You got to cut through the clutter. You're going to need a good video. You're going to need things that the money's better spent elsewhere. So. I've seen bands make.
So what you're saying is that it's not just the recording that matters. You have to consider all of the other factors that go along with making this a successful release, at least successful in the sense of getting it seen and getting it heard.
You got it. Yeah. I mean, focus. I mean, you got to get on some good shows. Play. You got to get your material to the people. You got to let them hear it. And traditionally a label.
You got to get it on Misery Point Radio, otherwise nobody's going to hear it.
Absolutely,
come on, this is how this works.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what it helps. Yeah, I mean, like I said, in some of these instances, money helps. To get the radio play, get the video play, to get on the shows. It's like it's not ideal that that's the way you do it, but I mean, traditionally, it's a lot of people don't realize. There's tour buy-ons. There's paid radio promotion, the Clear Channel that's all it is. It's like there's labels who pay for the rotation that they want. And it's like, that's traditionally how it's worked. And so the more you can do, on your own, as far as that's concerned or whatever, the better. The more people you're going to get access to and to hear your great record, so.
Yeah, so, do your homework. Do the legwork, do the hard work, and don't half-ass your way through it. Otherwise, you're going to get nowhere, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Well, hey, man, this has been an amazing conversation, and I definitely appreciate you coming on. But before we let you go, why don't you go ahead and plug your sites? Tell us all in the world where we can find you on the interwebs and in North Carolina.
Awesome. Well, I guess the first place you would want to go is, JamieKingAudio.com. That's my new website. I've tried to make it really simple. You can see pricing and things of that nature, and see some of the different services. And we're still refining things as far as that's concerned. But there's some of the different services I offer on that site. You can get links to ToneCrate.com. It has my Kemper tone bundles if you're interested in some of the guitar tones. Like I said, CreativeLive.com and the Unstoppable Recording Machine. I have classes on those. With those websites that go over anything from editing to recording, mixing, mastering. Some of the classes focus on other things more than others, but but those websites, not just for me. They all have tons of other amazing producers and industry peoples who are teaching their the things that they do on a regular basis. But yeah, I think those are the main ones as far as I can think, as far as I can remember. And obviously, with the Swift stuff, we're just on. If you're interested in my old band and stuff, I think we have a Facebook page, and all our material is going to be available on Apple and iTunes and Spotify and all that mess.
Awesome. Find him on all the iTunes, the Spotifys, the iHeartRadios, and all your music catcher type devices. Follow him on social media. Stalk him on the Book of Faces. Stalk him on Instagram. I'm sure you'll find him everywhere. And what town are you in North Carolina?
It's Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Drop everything you're doing. Go there right now and record an album. And I promise you, it might be listenable. I don't know. Maybe.
I'll try hard.
Hey, Jamie, thanks, brother. This has been awesome, and I look forward to checking out that soon-to-come Swift material, which I'm sure is heading our way soon, and looking forward to hearing some of the projects you got coming down the pike with Prophet and a lot of the other guys that you're working with. So thanks again for taking the time, and look forward to talking to you again real soon, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
And thanks to all of you for hanging out once more on Misery Point Radio. And a very special thank you to Mr. Ray Curry from Outlier for planting the seed and getting this whole thing going. Thanks, Ray. So don't forget, subscribe to the show, follow it on all the social media platforms, go check out all of Jamie King's websites, and don't forget to check out his band Swift Here's a song drawn and quartered off their album The Worst of All Things Possible.